You are listening to The Central Cast, a podcast for mystics and misfits just like you, recorded every week in Pasadena, California, before a live audience. Thanks for tuning in.
Standing. Morning. So this is probably going to happen at like the height of some point in my talk, but would you all let me know when the slide goes up about feeding the meter? Because I need to feed my meter. Usually I get to sit down there and nobody knows. Okay. So this morning is like story time. So I invite you, if you want to go get a donut, if you haven't gotten your coffee yet, sit back. There's going to be a lot of stories this morning. And the reason I wanted my talk to be like that is because I really am hoping that after I tell some stories, that we'll all tell our stories together. And this morning, I want to talk about lineage, our connection with those who came before us and with those who come after us. And you'll notice that in the stories that I tell this morning, I barely mention God, but God is everywhere in these stories because every one of them is about how to find and hold on to the original selfhood given us by God at our birth. And so as I tell these stories, I invite you to reflect on this. Who was it that taught you it was okay to be you? Who was it that taught you it was okay to be you? When I turned 40, I took a cross-country road trip. It was just me and my two pugs, Moses and Polly. Through a series of misadventures, instead of spending our third night in Yellowstone as planned, we spent it in Laramie, Wyoming. Laramie, Wyoming is a pretty convenient place to stop. It's right on the interstate. But what you probably know about Laramie, Wyoming is that it's where Matthew Shepard was brutally murdered. And we actually just had the something anniversary, like the 20-something anniversary of Matthew's death a week ago. And the following brief description is just, I lifted it straight from the Wikipedia page on Matthew. On the night of October 6, 1998, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson offered to give Matthew Shepard a ride home. But instead of doing that, they drove him to a remote rural area and proceeded to rob, pistol whip, and torture Shepard, tying him to a split rail fence and leaving him to die. Shepard was beaten so brutally that his face was completely covered in blood, except where it had been partially cleansed by his tears. After attacking Shepard and leaving him tied to the fence in near freezing temperatures, McKinney and Henderson returned to town, where they got in a fight and were subsequently arrested. Shepard was still tied to the fence 18 hours after the attack. He was in a coma when he was finally discovered by a cyclist who initially mistook him for a scarecrow. I want to pause on that image of Matthew mistaken for a scarecrow, tied to a few boards, beaten, arms out, left to die, alone, not just murdered, punished, humiliated, crucified. As a queer Christian, I claim this image as part of my lineage. Still, I was not planning to make a pilgrimage to Laramie, at least not alone and not that year. I just stopped there because that's where the road led. I pulled into a Motel 6, washed up, and headed to the Altitude Chop House, right downtown by the university. It had been raining earlier, and the clouds made the town darker than it should have been at 7 p.m. on a mid-July evening. I parked where a carnival was taking place. Laramie Days, a celebration of Wyoming statehood. And I'm not kidding, every stock photo that you see evoking rural America could have been sourced right there. There was a huge Ferris wheel against a sunset that lit up an impossibly long, flat horizon. There were guys and girls in cowboy hats and jeans paired off arm in arm. Everyone was out and seemed to be happy and enjoying the town. The street party was just getting going. A few couples swing danced near a bandstand where a bluegrass group was picking. From this scene, I stepped into the chop house and called up a website with directions on how to get to the site of Matthew's murder. And this is what I read. After the tragedy, all of the area street names were changed. That felt like a dagger to me, and it took a while for it to sink in. Area street names were all changed. Even this morning, years later, 11 years later, I'm not sure I fully comprehend or could fully express to you the literal and figurative darkness of that fact for me. It felt and it feels aggressive, an act of violence to cover up a previous act of violence. The town was trying to erase Matthew again, forever. I thought that such an aggressive act must leave a mark on the public record, so I Googled changed street names and Laramie, and I found nothing. When I left the restaurant, it was pouring rain, and a younger crowd was out, jumping and banging around to a country band. As I carefully skirted the crowd, I heard the refrain of Blake Shelton's Boys Round Here. Anyone know this song? It's not on your Spotify playlist. So here's how the song begins. Red, 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 redneck. And then, once the chorus came around, the crowd just lost it. And here's the chorus. With the boys round here drinking that ice cold beer, talking about girls, talking about trucks, running them red dirt roads out, kicking up dust. The boys round here sending up a prayer to the man upstairs. Backwoods legit, don't take no shit. Chew tobacco, chew tobacco, chew tobacco, spit. This did not feel like my scene. So I returned to the Motel 6. I went to bed and woke up the next morning, both determined to find the murder site and totally sick at the idea of finding the murder site. Okay, so I was determined and also sick. This is not unusual for me. I often tell myself that there are things I have to do, and those very things make me sick to my stomach. So the website had mentioned that visiting the murder site would mean trespassing. And that's one of the reasons why I was sick to my stomach, because maybe you don't think this about me, but I try to follow the law, especially when people might be watching. So once I got close to the site, I saw that what had once been a remote rural area, perfect for a hate crime, was now an expensive new housing development full of huge homes, the nicest I'd seen in Laramie. In fact, if Bravo ever did a Real Housewives of Laramie franchise, this would be where it would film. I saw what looked to me like part of a split rail fence. It was between two huge brand new houses. I parked as close as I could and tried to process what I was seeing. The memorial was in somebody's yard, like a swing set or a fire pit. Someone had purchased a big, expensive house on land soaked with blood and hate. I had a hard time imagining the real estate calculation that went into selling land where a brutal, public, historic hate crime and national disgrace had occurred. I really could not figure out whether the murder increased or decreased the property value. But my guess, especially looking back now from this year, 2025, my guess is that in Laramie, it just didn't matter at all. That Matt didn't matter at all. That queer folks didn't matter at all. The memorial itself was like 2 fragments of that fence and a sort of decomposing log with some fake flowers stuck in it. It was like the family that bought the plot had decided to exercise just enough reverence to keep away the nuisance of outcry if they had erased the spot completely. Sitting in my car, eyeing the memorial, I knew that I was that nuisance. Somehow on land where a brutal murder had occurred, I was the one who felt criminal. So I kept the car running and I high-stepped awkwardly through the prairie grass. I glanced over to the house and I noticed that the garage doors were wide open. Shit, I murmured. Someone's home. I felt even more jittery then and even sicker to my stomach. And once I was actually in the presence of the memorial, my hands were shaking so much that all I could do was take one blurry picture after another. I was not at all present. And then I ran as fast as I could to what felt like my getaway car. That was when I unfortunately met the owner of the house. I did not see her coming. She pulled up from behind me in a silver Honda Civic, which is weird because I was driving a silver Honda Civic. I think sometimes God has like a very weird sense of humor. Without even rolling down her window, she yelled at me. She pantomimed picture taking, and I lip read the words, "People like you." She carried on like she was disciplining a child who just would not listen. This queer girl with no respect for private property had really blown this woman's tolerance. It was like the not total erasure of the memorial was her family's grand gesture, a thing not to be taken for granted, a way outer limit of their goodwill that every decent person would know not to test. But to be honest, I don't really want to focus on just this one woman because that felt like the whole town's attitude. Let's be clear. You change the street names and sell sacred ground, so people like me will be lost. They did what they could to make sure that that spot of ground, holy to me, did not ever become a site of remembrance and connection and sacred visitation. But I'm here to tell you it didn't work. It didn't work. The homeowner's anger was a sure sign that it didn't work that day and it hadn't worked on the previous days either. Her blown composure signaled that many had come before me and tested her tolerance. Her exasperation at me was actually exasperation at a whole community, at the queer community, with its insistence on keeping a connection to Matthew, its insistence on having access to the ground that holds his story so that we can continue to tell that story alongside our own stories. This insistence is what many of us must do to protect a lineage, to protect what gives us identity, strength in community, and resilience when the tough times come. It is, in a lot of ways, what we do here at Central Avenue Church, protecting our connection to the sacred Jesus, whose teachings have been all but erased by those who take his name in vain, who occupy Calvary for their own selfish purposes. When we are connected to a lineage, when we fight for our belonging, we are never alone. We take our cues from our ancestors and fight for visibility so that future generations can find us and make their own way. I said that I invited you to think about the central question of lineage. Who made it okay for you to be who you are? I took my cues as a young queer woman from the Indigo Girls, a folk duo. They were the first ones who made it okay for me to be queer and Christian. Their shows were collective lament and collective joy for the community. They were church and political rally. They were like Christian camp, but where everyone is open and affirming, which would be amazing. Thousands of mostly women hanging out, standing up for the least of these, and having lots of feelings together. I mean, it's something you could stereotype if you wanted to, but that's where I learned it was okay to be me. I was actually at an Indigo Girls show last weekend. That's why I wasn't here with all of you. I was able to see a show in Albuquerque, and then my Albuquerque friend Kathy gave me her single ticket for the next night's show in Phoenix. And I said, Phoenix is on my way home anyway. So I got to go to that show on my way home. I had an awesome fifth row seat. Like, this ticket was expensive. And I was right next to this like very large aisle that ran horizontally the length of the stage. So I danced my heart out in that aisle while all the people around me sat down. I don't know what they were doing, but I didn't care. I danced like no one else was there, like no one was watching, eyes closed, swaying, lifting my hands like I was in a Pentecostal church. I wanted all the spirit, all the goodness, all the vibes to come through these hands and like recharge me, because 2025, 2026 is coming. After the set was over, I went to the concession area and had a pretzel. I'm sitting there, and this charming young woman with beautiful red hair walked by with her friend. They were leaving, and it looked like they needed to go. They were leaving quickly. But this woman stopped dead in her tracks and looked at me and said, "You're here alone, right?" She looked harmless, but I was like, that's a weird question. So I looked at her, I said, "Yes, why?" And she said this. She said, "I saw you. You danced the whole night by yourself. It was awesome. I wish I had the guts to do that." And I thanked her. And as she walked away, I'm so thankful that it occurred to me to yell the following. "It comes with being over 50. I said, "You have so much to look forward to." And she laughed and kept on walking. And that exchange means a lot to me. I mean, if you had seen me in the past week, I would have told you that story then. Because 30 years ago, I was the one learning it was okay to be me at Indigo Girls shows. And now I got the chance to model that for somebody else. I wanted this woman to know that she too would have the guts to dance like nobody's watching. I couldn't always do that at all, but I can now. And I wanted her to know that it's possible, that it's coming for her. That's the power of lineage. We learn and we teach. We find role models, accept ourselves through their embrace and example, and then become examples for others. I really can't think of a more beautiful thing, but we have to keep showing up for one another and demanding visibility and resisting erasure. We have to keep showing up for others like our ancestors showed up for us. And the way we show up for others is so simple and so hard and so necessary. We claim the original self given us at birth by God. I want to prime the pump with just one more story before we get to discussion, because after I thought about all of this, I realized that in the world that we're living in right now, The people who teach us how to live in our skin may not be our ancestors at all. They may not be people who are older than us at all. They may be our children. They may be folks in a generation below us who grew up with a more liberatory set of assumptions, less binary thinking, and greater emotional intelligence. I asked my niece, Karin, for permission to read to you a small part of her college essay. The prompt was, what is the hardest truth you've ever had to admit to yourself? And how did that truth set you free? She wrote about coming out after falling for a girl on a rival swim team. This is what she wrote. I will not cry. I may cry. She wrote this, 18 years old. I bargained with God in my prayers, terrified of what my church and family would think. I imagined myself standing in a rushing river between two massive canyons. On one side was my authentic queer self, and on the other, my Christian faith and my parents. Both sides mattered deeply and were an impossible choice. Eventually, I realized the answer wasn't choosing one side of the canyon or the other. It was to do what I had done since I was 3 years old. Swim. Swim in the middle of the chasm between the two sides that felt like they were tearing me apart. Swim with the same determination I used in every race. Swim toward a life where I could be loyal to God and also to my true self, even if others disapproved. 3 months later, I gathered the courage to tell my dad, my brother. I had never felt more anxious. My parents were biblically and politically conservative, and I feared their disappointment. I wrote the words I couldn't say aloud, I'm bi, and handed my dad the note. In the days that followed, my parents admitted their confusion and their fears. They did not hide their disappointment. But every conversation ended the same way. We will always love you. Since I came out, I've continued to attend church, and my faith has deepened rather than faded. I've also realized I'm not bisexual. I'm lesbian. My parents, though still conservative, have grown alongside me. When they talk about my future partner, they use female pronouns. My mom even buys me rainbow keychains, notebooks, and mugs when she sees them in stores. What once felt impossible, acceptance from both my family and my church, has slowly become a reality. I once believed my faith and identity were canyons, glowering at each other, fighting over me. Instead, I've discovered a truth more powerful than my fear. Faith and identity don't have to fight. They can coexist. They can swim together. After I stopped crying, I showed the essay to my friend Tina, who doesn't pull punches, and her immediate response to me was, Julie, could you even write that? Now at 51? I mean, at 51, Julie, are you that reconciled between your sexuality and your faith? Like, officially, I was very offended by those questions. But I took the point because Karin is light years ahead of me in her development. And she is because she's part of a lineage that she's claiming. Karin teaches me and makes me feel even more comfortable in my own skin. At 18, she is my teacher. Brave, honest, vulnerable, both fierce and tender. At 18, she's already part of my lineage. And because of that, we make each other stronger, more resilient, and more joyful. It's a gift. So now I want to turn it over to all of you and ask again the question that I asked at the beginning. Who showed you it was okay to be you? And we can also talk about who are you showing that freedom to? And of course, we can talk about anything else that came up as you were listening. So, story time is not over, but The microphone is yours now. Where is the microphone? Bob has a microphone. Keela.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story about the Matthew Shepard thing. As you were talking, I was thinking about living in the South. And in the town I lived in, there was a place called Hell Plantation. And yeah, I hated driving over there. And there's also, when I went to South Carolina for vacation, like in 2021, and I had done, gotten a travel agent to make the plans for me. And as I was driving, I said, oh no, I did not tell her, do not put me in a place with plantation in the name. Because when you drive down the road, that's the name of all the resorts or whatever. So, yeah, America. Yeah, I think to answer your question, also I appreciated the kids time at the church I went to before. They would always do a kid's story during the service, and that was a lot of fun. But as for the question, I think the people who I'm most myself with are my longest running friends, the people who have known me the longest, in my family. And then my daughter is also like years ahead of me, especially in terms of her compassion. And so she's really been a role model in terms of really being caring and compassionate and empathetic towards others. And so I appreciate the question and the topic.
Hello. When you asked that question, I'll be honest, my first thought was Pee Wee Herman for teaching Pee Wee Herman.
Okay.
For teaching us all in the late 80s that it was okay to be like really weird and fun. But it was my father who loved Pee Wee Herman and would watch it with me every weekend and all the movies. And I will cry.
Please do.
He and I shared, I inherited from him the same whatever undiagnosed neurodivergence that makes us both like awkward and introverted and weird. And at his memorial, I saw that like everyone knew that about him and saw that in him and loved him anyway. And that made me so happy for him and for me. And Claire's favorite thing about herself is being weird. She loves it. She's so proud of it.
I love it.
So.
Thank you. That's quite a lineage. I mean, and that's what an amazing statement that, from Pee Wee Herman and your dad to you to Claire, that like, and Claire's favorite thing about herself is that she's weird. That's the thing. That's the whole talk is like, who are you really? Like what, like, and the world can just chip away at that and try to make us conform in all these ways so that we can lose that. And what a gift to Claire to be growing up and saying like, I love that I'm weird. And you're modeling that for her. And sorry, but that's a gift, because out of that weirdness, everything else will come, because she won't feel like she has to fight other people. She will just grow into who she already is. Thank you for
Hi. Okay. There's a few things. First, I want to name you said your niece, right? Okay. She's young. So you're also going to have to continue to model that when she loses some of her teenage hubris and then goes through the like, I thought I knew myself. I was so ready. And then that pure, like, I know nothing. And so it's so exciting that she's brave and she has you and other people, but also like the world is more open and accepting. But we all so much. And then the reason why I want to speak on that is I teach high school seniors, so I do a lot of like essay writing for college apps and things like that. And I just really like to model for my students just that it's okay to change your mind, it's okay to grow, it's okay to change who you are entirely, but it's also okay to not to like be the same person that you will always have been, as long as you're still growing in kindness and love for others. And so they both encourage me and teach me, and I look up to them because so many of them are doing things that I'm like, I could never at your age have even considered that this is where we would be going in a correct way. And then I think also some of them look up to me because I am vulnerable with them, and I will tell them things that I've struggled with, acceptable, they don't know everything, but, I'll let them know that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to not know, it's okay to be that for them, and so I like to model that for them, and I think for me, it came from my mom, right, who was kind of a hot mess, but she taught me a lot of things, including, like, she was one to like, she was a people pleaser for her whole life, but she would get to a point where she'd take no shit from anyone, and she would teach me that. She'd be like, "Don't let them disrespect you, punch them in the face." I'd be like, "Okay, okay, I don't know." I don't know if that's what I'm gonna do, but it is a fighting spirit that I have, and so I always tell people, including my students, I love to fight, and by that I mean, like, I will argue for whoever needs to be, like, I will always fight for what's right, for equality, for justice, and things like that, and so it's that sort of, like, I'm not gonna punch someone in the face, most likely, but it's that, like, willingness to fight and, like, stand up, and then that's why a lot of people are like, "Thank you for saying something." I'm like, "Yeah, you could have said it too, but it's fine, I'll say it." And so like, it's a whole cycle of, like, we continue to show and grow and push and learn.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad our young people have you to fight for them and show them how to fight.
In my early 20s, I lived in this big rambling house with a bunch of other 20-somethings and was really the only, I would say, person of faith who would go to church, but just at a point where I'd already started kind of deconstructing, but it was just being immersed somewhere where these people were, so much more loving, so much more open-minded. Their relationships with their partners were all massively more healthy than anything I saw growing up in the church. And I think one of my roommates, she just knew I was kind of processing things, and she told me, just stand confidently in the space you take up on this planet. And that meant a lot because it just, maybe not necessarily so much in my family, but growing up in like a deeply complementarian, aka sexist, like church experience, like if one person had said that to me from nursery school through high school, like Christian Sunday school, like that would have meant so much. So that my friend Rosie told me that. And then just echoing, like with all the young people like impacting us who are just so much more awakened. My niece is 13 and she's trans and she's known who she is like since toddler, but seeing that outworked in our family has been really beautiful. And there's, it's not without its challenges, but just the grace of my niece and her 3 older brothers and my sister and her husband just being so supportive and learning and doing everything they possibly can, and like seeing their community support and grow with them. It just, again, they're just so forward thinking in a way that is just hard to understand and really inspiring.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing. That was, it's not like you have to do what I want you to do, but that's what I was hoping that we would get, some good stories. And I just want to open it up for anyone who's, a broader discussion, like what's going on? How's life? Is there a challenge coming up that we can, hold you as you walk into, or is there, Akila?
And so he is in what they call relapse. So they have to, on the 20th, he goes back to the doctor to get scans and everything to see what the next option for treatment is. So I would appreciate prayers from my mom. They're way over there.
Where are they?
Mm-hmm.
Are they out of state?
Yeah, they're in Florida.
Florida. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. We will keep your dad in our hearts and minds. Everyone's good. No challenges. No challenge. No, I mean, there's no. Well, what I used to do when I pastored, a more traditional church was I would say this. I'm going to say it here. I know that we all have challenges and joys. Some of them have been shared. Some of them have not been. And so whatever is in your mind and in your heart, trust that in some way the rest of us feel it, and we will be holding you up, holding you in the light, remembering you as we go through this week. Awesome. Well, what do we do now? Benediction. Yes, our beloved benediction. All right, let's read this together. As we go from this place, we commit ourselves to the path of love, honesty, and humility. Dedicate ourselves as Christ did to the cause of justice and the courageous embrace of this life, this world, and each other. Amen.
Thanks for listening in on this week's edition of the Central Cast. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you join us next time. Bye-bye.